Jai Mahamaya ki jai, Vishveshvari Mata ki jai. We'll go on with the completion of chapter 37, and then go on to chapter 38. So even when they were children, Duryodhana hated his cousin Bhima obsessively. Many a time, O Narada, that evil prince tried to kill Vayu's son. But fortuitously, Bhima escaped each time, for his, like his brothers, was a great destiny. Ah, such a great and terrible destiny. When the princes were a little older, Dhritarashtra made Pandu's son Yudhishthira Yuvaraja. The elders of the city and its people were delighted. They could not have hoped for a better or wiser crown prince. They could not hope to have a better king to rule them eventually, once the blind Dhritarashtra decided to relinquish power. But Duryodhana and his brothers simmered with envy. Duryodhana built a palace of Lak in the city of Varanasi and persuaded his father to send the Pandavas there for a long sojourn. There his man Purochana was to set fire to the treacherous edifice. But their uncle Vidura learned of the plot. He sent a tunneler to the Pandavas, who made them a subterranean passage through which they could escape after setting fire themselves to the house of the Lak one night, with Purochana inside and also a Nishada woman and her 5 sons, so the world believed the Pandavas were dead. Duryodhana rejoiced, and his father Dhritarashtra too. The Kurus mourned the Pandavas, for they knew what a monster Duryodhana was. Muni, you can imagine my grief when I heard that the Pandavas had been killed. But then my heart insisted they were not dead, and I sought them out with my Dhyan Shakti. I found them in the wilderness, disguised as 5 young Brahmanas and their mother. Now Draupadi of the Panchala kingdom held a Swayamvara for his daughter Draupadi, who was the most beautiful woman in the world. Drupada held a tournament in his city for the prince's suitors. He hung a spinning fish 100 hands high in the air. Only the archer who could bring down that fish was with 5 arrows aiming in the trough of water at his feet would have Draupadi for his wife. The greatest Kshatriya archers on earth failed to find the target, but Arjuna, disguised as a Brahmana, brought it down. But then, by a strange turn of fate, all 5 Pandavas married this exquisite Draupadi, who had once been born from a sacred fire. Word flashed across the land that the Pandavas had risen from the dead. It was in Draupadi's city, Kampilya, that Krishna, the avatar, first met his cousins. It was a fateful meeting, Narada, one that would change the fate of the whole world. Dhritarashtra gave Yudhishthira and his brothers an arid wasteland as their inheritance. But when Krishna arrived there with his cousins, the ancient curse ended. He called upon Indra and Vishvakarma. They transformed the desolate and desolation, and with divine powers raised the splendid city of Indraprastha in the wilderness. Arjuna and Krishna helped Agni Deva burn the Kandava Vana, and they saved the Asura Maya's life. In gratitude, that greatest of all builders, who was once lord of the fabulous Tripura, created a matchless Sabha in Indraprastha for Yudhishthira and his brothers. Soon persuaded by you, O Muni, that it was the only way to help their father's soul ascend to Indra's heaven from Yama's halls, the Pandavas performed the Rajasuya Yagya. They conquered all the kingdoms of Bharat Varsha, north, south, east, and west. These kings came to Indraprastha with treasures and tribute, and Yudhishthira was crowned emperor, a king of kings. How his cousin Duryodhana burned with envy he could not bear. Conspiring with his father and his uncles, the perfidious Sakuni, Duryodhana invited his cousins to play dice in Hastinapura. With the invitation coming from his uncle, my son, the blind king, Yudhishthira could not refuse. He came with his brothers and their queens to Hastina. At first, Yudhishthira refused to play, but then Sakuni taunted him in the public, saying the emperor of all Bharat Varsha was afraid to play a game of dice, and Yudhishthira allowed himself to be provoked. Sakuni was known to be the best dice player on earth, and the noble Yudhishthira was perhaps the most naive. Moreover, the dice Sakuni was using were loaded. Once Yudhishthira lost the first game of dice, he lost his head as well. He wagered everything he owned and lost it to Sakuni, who was, of course, playing for his nephew, Duryodhana. Why, when Yudhishthira had lost his army, his treasury, and his kingdom, he wagered his brothers, then himself, and finally even Draupadi. Duryodhana won all this. He had his brother drag Draupadi into the Kurusabha and try to strip her naked. But from afar, Krishna's grace clothed her in an endless garment of many hues. Growing afraid, Drishta restored their freedom to the sons of Pandu and their queen. But the condition was that they would spend 12 years in exile in the forest and the 13th in disguise in a city of Menon. If any of them were recognized during that 13th year, they must spend another 12 years in exile. At the time of the 13th year, Duryodhana would return their half of the kingdom to his cousins. O Narada, I have no peace worrying about the sons of Pandu, yet are they truly my grandsons? Though their father was born of my seed, all right, Muni, every few weeks I go off into the forest to see if the Pandavas and their Draupadi are well. Anguish clouds my very soul. I fear I am fervently attached, as no rishi should be. Chapter 38. Vedavyasa went on. Narada said to me, Muni, which embodied soul exists in this world without attachment? Why Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva are in the grip of samsara? Why speak of the rest? Look at me, Vedavyasa. Do you think I am a true Gyan? Do you think I am never deluded by Maya? Then listen to a story I have to tell you about myself. Once my sister's son, the Rishi Parvata, and I came down from Devaloka to the earth, the world of mortals, to wander the sacred land of Bharat Varsha. We went from one tirtha to another holy tirtha on a great pilgrimage, stopping on our way in the ashrams of the munis of the earth. Before we set out, we had agreed we would not hide anything from each other, least of all what we felt, be it good or bad, be it anything at all. After we had ranged the fascinating world for some months, we arrived at the end of summer when the monsoon was just beginning in the city of Sanjaya. This king was a kindly and generous man, and for the 4 months of rain he kept us willingly and with honor in his palace. Sanjaya had a daughter called Damayanti, and he asked her to look after us. She was a beautiful girl and began to serve us diligently, drawing water for our baths, bringing us fresh towels every morning, and our food thrice a day. We 2 munis were well looked after indeed and lived under Sanjaya's roof, studying the Vedas. As you know, Vyasa, I am fond of singing, and the Lord has blessed me with a voice. So I would sing the Sama Gayatri songs in King Sanjaya's palace, accompanying myself on the veena. As you know, Muni, the Sama songs are enchanting. The princess Damayanti would come and sit raptly at my feet as I sang. From then on, she was especially affectionate towards me. Day by day, I could see how she was always wanting to be close to me. Why, there was little doubt the young girl was falling in love with me. And she was so exquisite, and her nature was so sweet that I, too, was powerfully drawn to her. Damayanti began to make a subtle distinction between Rishi Parvata and me. She would bring me better food than him and warm water for my bath while he got cold. I would get curd with my rice while Parvati only got whey. I slept on a fine mattress of down while my friend had to make do with just a sheet, which was not changed very often. And always she would turn her big eyes on me, full of love. One day Parvati took me aside and said, "What is going on here, Narada? It seems the princess is in love with you. Why, with the distinction she makes between you and me, I would say she wants you for her husband. And when I see you cast burning glances at her, Muni, I fear you would not be adverse to it yourself. Come now, tell me all. We swore when we set out from Devaloka that we would hide nothing from each other." I felt shy, yes, but I said to Parvati, "It is true, the princess and I are drawn to each other. I do want to marry her." Then a strange thing happened. Suddenly, a great rage seemed to grip Parvata. For some reason, he felt humiliated, even betrayed. Perhaps the truth was that he had eyes for the princess Damayanti himself, but the matter remains hidden from me. Anyways, his eyes turned crimson in a moment, and he cursed me. "Base deceiver, it is because she finds you handsome that she favors you so. Wear a monkey's face from now on. We shall see how long her love lasts." No sooner did the words leave his lips than my face was a baboon's, and though he was my nephew, I cursed him back, saying, "Arrogant Muni, you have cursed me like this for hardly any fault. You shall not travel back to Devaloka, but remain here on earth forever." Vyasa, even with my baboon's face, Damayanti's feelings for me did not cool. When Parvata stalked away from that kingdom in wrath, she began to serve me even more devotedly, and she would come every day and sit in my room to hear me play on my veena and sing. Narada paused, sighing to remember. Vedavyasa cried eagerly, "What happened then, Muni?" I was dreadfully anxious, as you might imagine. Why, what would I do now with my monkey's face? And I was still fervently in love with the beautiful princess. She had come to age, and the king, Sanjaya, called his ministers together and told them to find a prince from a noble house to marry his daughter. But when Damayanti heard of this, she sent a Saki of hers to her father. The young woman came and said to Sanjaya, "My lord, Damayanti has lost her heart to the Rishi Narada. She sits for hours listening to him play on his veena. She wants only him for her husband." Sanjaya's queen, Kaikeya, sat beside him. The king turned to her and said, "Did you hear this? My Damayanti has chosen a beggar for herself, and no common beggar, but one with a monkey's face. I will never allow this. Talk to that child. Make her see sense before it is too late." The queen called her daughter and said gently, "Ah, my child, what is this I hear? How can a beautiful young woman like you want a monkey-faced rishi for a husband? We will find you a handsome prince. Give up this foolishness, Damayanti. You will never be able to spend the rest of your life with such a crude hermit. Mother, your father is anxious. Set his mind at rest." But her daughter said, "Mother, a man cannot be judged by his face and his body. These are superficial things. I have lost my heart to Narada because of his music, his soul. Why, the deer of the forest are enchanted because of his music, and by perfect Nandan, mother. I have heard that they even give up their lives for the sake of sweet song. Love is not a thing that of the eyes, but of the heart. Listening to Narada's Veena and his singing, I lose myself in joy. Where else will I find such rapture, Mother? Oh, I cannot live without it. If a woman follows a man who knows music, he leads her to heaven. Has my father forgotten that Narada Muni is who he is, that he balks at giving me to him? In the three worlds and the three times, there is no singer like Narada. Why? There is no bhakta like him. Mother, the Kannaras of Devaloka have horses' head, but don't they bewitch even the Devas and the Gandharvas with their songs? You are a woman yourself, Mother. You know how little a man's appearance counts in love. I beg you, convince the king that he must give me to Narada and no one else. Queen Kaikeyi was moved by what her daughter said. She went back to the king and said to him, "Oh, our child has already given her heart to Narada. She will not marry anyone else, and if you force her, I fear she will take her life. She is no foolish child. She is truly in love." The king took a day to think about this. Then he fixed an auspicious day for Damayanti to marry me. We were married with every ceremony and began to live together as man and wife. My Damayanti alone shone with joy whenever she saw me. She never tired of hearing me play my veena and sing. She was always eager to make love with me. But Vyasa, my heart burned within me when I thought of my long monkey's face. I had no peace even when I slept, for my ugly face haunted my dreams and gibbered mockery at me. And when I was awake, I thought of hardly anything else. A few years passed, and then Muni Parvata returned to my father-in-law's kingdom after his long pilgrimage that had taken him to all the sacred sites. It seemed that his yatra had purified my nephew and rid him of his anger. He came to see me in my apartment. Without a word, he sat down before me, and I saw that tears welled down his face. After a moment, he took my hand. He said, "Uncle, I cursed you in anger, and I regret what I did. Let my curse end this moment, and your old face be restored to you." I felt my long snout and furry features vanish, and when I jumped up and looked in the silver mirror on the wall, I was myself again. With a shout of joy, I clasped Parvata to me and cried, "Your journey to Devaloka shall no longer be impeded either." And Muni, when Damayanti saw me, she was so happy. The king and queen were delighted too and declared a celebration to their city. Sanjaya gave away gold and jewels as alms, and all was well. That ended so. But the point I was making, Vyasa, was that no creature, great or small, is free of desire, delusions, anger, envy, vanity, and the inevitable suffering they bring. All that exists is pervaded by the three gunas of nature: sattva, rajas, tamas. Everything that happens in this three worlds is by their three essences of nature. All existence is Maya. Why, once when I was walking through a forest with Bhagavan Vishnu, suddenly the strangest transformation came over me. "Would you hear what happened?" said Narada. "I would indeed," cried I eagerly, for his stories were marvelous. The power of Maya is incomprehensible to the wisest of the wise. Once I was seized with an irresistible urge to see my Lord Vishnu. I set out from Satyaloka, my veena in hand, and went by Rishi Marg to Svetadwarpa, the blessed island where Narayana, Lord Vishnu, dwells. I went singing my favorite Samavedas. Soon I walked into Vishnu's presence, and my heart was full. He was illustrious and four-armed, with a Sudarsana chakra in one hand. His presence was of a great fresh rain cloud, and his skin was smoky blue, the hue for which he was known as Shyama. He wore beautiful silks, and a great ruby shone like a red star on his deep chest. He wore a sparkling crown on his head. But Muni wasn't alone. Lakshmi was with him. She covered herself quickly when she saw me and ran into the next room. I offered Narayana the garland of wild flowers I had brought to him and said, Lord, why did the Devi leave as soon as she saw me? I'm a rishi and a master of my desires. Vishnu said to me, as Lakshmi was, a woman should never stay before another man, whoever he may be. Narada, the greatest rishis are deluded by Maya. Why, you love music so much, isn't music sensual? Isn't the sweetest songs also Maya's enchantment? Maya is mysterious and subtle, Narada. No one has ever conquered her. I was amazed. I said, what is this Maya truly like, Lord? Show her to me. Maya is everywhere, Narada. Her nature is the three gunas. She is the foundation of all existence. But if you would see her, come with me. He summoned brilliant Garuda with just a thought, and we climbed astride the great eagle. Vishnu spoke no word to Garuda, but he knew where to go. Swift on the wind, he flew us across continents over mountains and jungles, rivers laid like threads upon the earth, villages and cities of men, fields like emerald carpets, tanks and lakes, herds of deer and elephants, prides of lion and lone panthers sawing up at us to a place near Kanuj. There was a crystalline lake there, overgrown with the most vivid lotuses. All sorts of waterfowl were there, and the sounds of all the birds created a beautiful symphony around it. It was a charmed place where teeming flocks of pink flamingos fished. Garuda set us down softly, and Vishnu took my hand and said, come, Narada, let us go bathe in that lake. You go first, and I will follow. I gladly set down my deerskin and my veena and walked into the water. I tied my hair up, pulled up some kusa grass that grew conveniently near, and performed archmonium. The water was cool and invigorating and scented sublimely with the lotuses that grew on it. I plunged in Vyasa and began to bathe. After my first immersion, I turned and I saw Vishnu gazing at me with a strange look in his eye. I felt the queerest tingling in my body, and when I looked down at myself, I cried out. I had turned into a woman. I stood thunderstruck and saw Vishnu pick up my veena and my deerskin. Smiling, he mounted Garuda and flew into the sky. As he went, it seemed he took my memory with him, for I no longer remembered who I was. I forgot all about Narada and his veena. Why, I even forgot about Lord Vishnu. In a daze, I came out of that lake, mother naked and ravishing too, and sat on the velvet grasses on the lakeside, gazing out over the breeze-swept water, wondering who I was and how I had gotten there. Then I heard horses' hoofs behind me and turned to see a handsome king staring at me. He called to me, lovely one, who are you? Are you a Nagina, or an Apsara, or a Gandharvi, or a Devi? Whoever you are, do you belong to any man? If you don't, please marry me, for I have lost my heart to you. So said Narada to Vedavyasa. Jai Mahamaya ki jai, Vishveshwari Mata ki jai, Bole Baba ki